Islands. These men and women train all year round to be ready, whether our governor needs them here at home or our president sends them far away. Then, they're Iowans serving their country. Join our winning team. Call now.
They're the fast-growing...
The U.S. Congress works overtime, but it won't clear its plate before Thanksgiving. A Khmer Rouge leader returns to Cambodia, then runs for his life. And Israel wants to put the Mideast peace talks in Washington on hold. CNN Headline News, I'm Lynn Vaughn. The homecoming was extremely brief and dangerous for Khieu Samphan. Decades of anger boiled over today as the Khmer Rouge leader ended his 13 years of exile from Cambodia. Sue Downey reports.
Khieu Samphan arrived aboard a commercial flight from Bangkok just before 9 and was greeted behind closed doors by Vice Foreign Minister Sok An. Khieu Samphan commanded the resistance forces, which ousted the US-backed Lon Nol government, and was appointed head of state during the Khmer Rouge's 1975-79 rule, during which an estimated 1 million people died. It's more than 12 years since Khieu Samphan and colleagues fled the capital, ahead of the advancing Vietnamese forces who overthrew the Khmer Rouge and established the present government. And he told reporters as he left the airport he was happy to be back and intended staying forever. As he was driven to the city, students chanted and waved placards, some with a black cross painted over his picture. The demonstration was organized and orderly, but the atmosphere changed dramatically when the Khmer Rouge leader arrived at the house where he was to stay. The small crowd quickly grew into an angry rock-throwing protest. I witnessed part of the demonstration. The crowd are now breaking up the police barricades, breaking them into short lengths of timber, and throwing them at the house. The crowd grew larger and more aggressive and eventually broke into the house. The demonstrators have now got inside the house and they're bringing out all the furniture. They're throwing clothing and bedding around, maps, throwing it all around the area. Chaos. Some food, clothing, the fence is being ripped apart. The demonstrators have now lit a fire, throwing everything onto the fire. Some demonstrators are walking around with parts of radios, parts of the tent, clothing, bedding. Everything's now being put on the fire. Prime Minister Hun Sen came to the house and, using a handheld microphone, personally appealed to the crowds to disperse. But they remained, some still throwing stones at the building and shouting for Khieu Samphan to come out and explain to the people why so many of their relatives died under his rule. After being blockaded in the house for 5.5 hours, Khieu Samphan appeared with blood on his face and head and was bundled into one of 6 armoured personnel carriers. Khieu Samphan and the rest of the Khmer Rouge delegation were taken to the airport and flown back to Bangkok aboard a government airliner. Sue Downey for CNN in Phnom Penh.
Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has ensured the approval of a controversial defense measure amid chaos on the floor of Parliament. Angry opposition members rushed to the podium to try to prevent the announcement of the bill's passage in committee. The measure would allow Japanese troops to be sent overseas for active operations. That has not happened since the end of World War II. The U.S. House of Representatives stayed open all night as Congress tried to finish work before the Thanksgiving recess. The House gave overwhelming approval to a transportation bill earmarking $119 billion for highways and $32 billion for mass transit. Sponsors touted it as an anti-recession measure that will create millions of jobs. The Senate and President Bush are expected to go along with the plan. Presidential approval is much less certain for a banking bill approved this morning by a House-Senate Conference Committee. The bill would provide a $70 billion loan to fund the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which protects bank deposits. Separate legislation would provide $80 billion for the savings and loan bailout. Some banking reform proposals were eliminated, and that has upset White House officials. And the House passed an anti-crime bill today, but the margin was so slim, there appears to be no chance to override a promised presidential veto. The vote was 205 to 203. The bill would require a 5-day wait for handgun purchases and the death penalty for 53 federal crimes. It would also provide funds for more prisons, but it doesn't go far enough for many conservatives.
Well, good morning, America. Wait till you see what the Congress of the United States and the House of Representatives have stayed up all night to bring you today. A bill that will make worse the criminal laws, a bill that will make worse the present criminal laws in the United States of America.
Mr. Speaker, I think that perhaps we need a crime bill if for no other reason than to address the crime that's being committed on this floor today, and that is the gross misrepresentation of this bill by the other side for obvious political purposes.
In other action, the House authorized $400 million to dismantle Soviet weapons and $100 million in humanitarian aid for the Soviets. The United Nations Security Council is meeting at this hour to decide whether to send a peacekeeping force to Yugoslavia. The Yugoslav representative to the UN has asked that troops be sent immediately, but the UN says the two warring sides must first comply with the latest ceasefire. That doesn't seem to be happening. Scattered fighting continues around the Croatian town of Osijek. Serbian leaders are demanding Croatia surrender that city and 3 others. Israel will not attend Middle East peace talks in Washington, it seems, next week. A government spokesman says Israel needs more time to prepare. He's requesting the talks be delayed until December 9th. A Palestinian negotiator called the Israeli move a classic example of blackmail. The State Department says the U.S. wants unqualified acceptances. So far, only Jordan and Lebanon have responded without condition. Britain, France, and the U.S. are expected to release a statement on terrorism at this hour. It is expected to call for Muammar Gaddafi's government to surrender 2 Libyans charged in connection with the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. So far, Libya has not shown any willingness to comply. A tent city is springing up in Cuba as the U.S. tries to shelter thousands of Haitian refugees. White House officials say they hope it doesn't prompt more Haitians to flee their troubled country. The Reverend Jesse Jackson led demonstrations in Washington and Miami yesterday. He urged the United States to force the return of ousted Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Jackson denounced the U.S. proposal to deport most Haitian refugees. A federal judge will decide next week whether the United States can forcibly do that. Opening arguments begin Monday in Florida in the sexual assault trial of William Smith. The case underscores the difficulty of proving allegations of date rape. Charles Jaco reports.
The William Kennedy Smith case has brought the subject of date rape into homes across the United States. Thousands of date rape allegations every year go unnoticed by the public. Not this one.
I went into the kitchen and my mind was terrified, trying to figure out, number one, oh my God, I think I'm raped. And that's not supposed to happen.
Whether or not it was rape will be decided in court.
Anytime you have a case, whether it's a murder case or a robbery case or a fraud case, and the case relies upon one person's word against another, you of course have a more difficult time than when there are many witnesses to it.
You want to cast doubt on the credibility of the accuser, and you want to make your client come across, obviously, as a credible, good person who's telling the truth.
Rape is already the most serious underreported crime in our society. And one of the reasons women don't report is because they fear that if they report that they're victims of rape, they'll be stigmatized, they'll be humiliated.
Yet seminars on acquaintance rape on campuses around the country stress those crimes should be reported.
I thought that I had done something wrong by being in this man's room, by being on his bed.
What's at issue is whether women who wear lacy underwear or drink late at night at a man's house or the like have a right to say no.
In this case, rape crisis advocates think a message may be sent far beyond the Palm Beach County courtroom.
Not only is there
we're always there for you. The world keeps rearranging. One thing's never ever-changing.
Wherever Iowans gather, more are covered by the plans of Blue Cross and Blue Shield than any other.
Don't you know it's true? You just can't beat the blues.
Cambodians try to lynch a symbol of the hated Khmer Rouge. A peace plan starts badly. Congress tries to outdo the White House on economic bailout plans as adjournment nears. And a documentary on the Biosphere Project turns up too many unflattering things. The producer gets hauled into court. Headline news, Chuck Roberts will have those stories in a minute, but first, this one, Israel has announced it is willing to come to Washington next week for Middle East peace talks, but not on December 4th, as the U.S. had asked. The Israelis say they need more time to prepare, so they want the talks pushed back 5 days to December 9th. A Palestinian negotiator quickly denounced that proposal. In a carefully worded response to today's developments, the U.S. State Department said it's not changing its plans and will make facilities for negotiations available from December 4th on. The demands carry little pain, but they are specific and angry and come from powerful capitals. The United States and Great Britain today demanding Libya turn over 2 intelligence agents indicted in connection with the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103. The jumbo jet was blown up over Lockerbie, Scotland during Christmas week, killing 270 people, including 11 on the ground. Libya is being told to pay compensation to the victims' survivors, but there is no deadline and no mention of sanctions in the demands. There's also no response yet from Libya, which has always denied involvement in the bombing. The Cambodian peace plan may be in jeopardy. A Khmer Rouge leader who is supposed to participate in a coalition government fled Cambodia today after a confrontation with an angry mob. Sue Downey has the story in Phnom Penh.
Khieu Samphan arrived aboard a commercial flight from Bangkok just before 9 and was greeted behind closed doors by Vice Foreign Minister Sok An. Khieu Samphan commanded the resistance forces, which ousted the US-backed Lon Nol government and was appointed head of state during the Khmer Rouge's 1975-79 rule, during which an estimated 1 million people died. It's more than 12 years since Khieu Samphan and colleagues fled the capital, ahead of the advancing Vietnamese forces who overthrew the Khmer Rouge and established the present government. And he told reporters as he left the airport he was happy to be back and intended staying forever. As he was driven to the city, students chanted and waved placards, some with a black cross painted over his picture. The demonstration was organized and orderly, but the atmosphere changed dramatically when the Khmer Rouge leader arrived at the house where he was to stay. The small crowd quickly grew into an angry rock-throwing protest. I witnessed part of the demonstration. The crowd are now breaking up the police barricades, breaking them into short lengths of timber, and throwing them at the house. The crowd grew larger and more aggressive and eventually broke into the house. The demonstrators have now got inside the house and they're bringing out all the furniture. They're throwing clothing and bedding around, mats, throwing it all around the area. Chaos. Some food, clothing, the fence is being ripped apart. The demonstrators have now lit a fire, throwing everything onto the fire. Some demonstrators are walking around with parts of radios, parts of the fence, clothing, bedding. Everything's now being put on the fire. Prime Minister Hun Sen came to the house and using a handheld microphone personally appealed to the crowds to disperse. But they remained, some still throwing stones at the building and shouting for Khieu Samphan to come out and explain to the people why so many of their relatives died under his rule. After being blockaded in the house for 5.5 hours, Khieu Samphan appeared with blood on his face and head and was bundled into one of 6 armoured personnel carriers. Khieu Samphan and the rest of the Khmer Rouge delegation were taken to the airport and flown back to Bangkok aboard a government airliner. Sue Downey for CNN in Phnom Penh.
The UN Security Council has unanimously voted for a resolution that prepares the way for sending peacekeeping troops to Yugoslavia. The measure supports the Secretary General's efforts to get the warring sides to observe the latest ceasefire. The UN has demanded compliance with the truce before it sends in peacekeepers. European community officials say sporadic fighting continues in the breakaway Republic of Croatia. Both Croatia and the Serbian-led Yugoslav army are blaming each other for violations of the ceasefire. In an unconfirmed report, Croatian radio says the town of Osijek is under fierce attack now from all sides and that 10 people have been killed. Refugees from Croatia continue pouring into Hungary. Thousands of people have been killed in fighting since Croatia declared its independence in June. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has ensured the approval of a controversial defense measure aimed amid chaos on the floor of the Diet. Angry opposition members rushed to the podium to prevent the announcement of the bill's passage in committee. This measure would allow Japanese troops to be sent overseas for active operations. That hasn't happened since the end of World War II. We're just a day before Thanksgiving. The U.S. Congress trying to wrap up things and recess. Lawmakers want to return home in time for the holidays. By a margin of just 2 votes, the House today approved and sent to the Senate an anti-crime bill. The measure would expand the federal death penalty and require a 5-day waiting period for handgun purchases. But some lawmakers claim the bill doesn't do enough to curb gun sales.
We should attach a tax credit provision to this bill so every American citizen could go out and buy a flak jacket, because this bill declares open season.
The House and Senate have both passed a $151 billion highway and mass transit bill. The president is expected to approve the measure, which could create millions of jobs across the country. The House today also approved a bill to provide $70 billion to replenish the bank insurance fund. It also passed a $25 billion measure to provide stopgap funding to continue the bailout of failed savings and loans. An appearance by former U.S. National Security aide Oliver North drew an angry protest in Britain yesterday. The demonstration was fueled by claims North might have used Anglican Church envoy Terry Waite indirectly causing his kidnapping in Lebanon. Rick Salinger has more.
Demonstrators gave Oliver North their version of a warm welcome to Britain. They carried signs calling him a criminal and the betrayer of freed British hostage negotiator Terry Waite.
The thought that he could have actually been being manipulated, being used for and involved in any way in the Iran-Contra scandal was just would be so outrageous.
But inside the Cambridge University Debating Society Hall, the reception was more hospitable. North was asked if he felt accountable for Waite's kidnapping.
No, I don't feel responsible. The people who are responsible for Terry Waite being taken hostage are the people who took him hostage.
Waite's homecoming has been clouded by allegations that he worked on behalf of the CIA. Headlines said such publicity could affect his health. North admits meeting with Waite more than a dozen times, providing him with helicopter transportation to Beirut and giving him the contact name Mr. Good.
Well, it's a matter of record that I was William P. Good and that Terry Waite and I met a number of times. Terry Waite was, as I have said numerous times, helpful to our efforts and I think essential to the recovery of 3 Americans.
Waite appeared at a news conference with released hostage Benjamin Weir in 1985. That was before Waite was involved in the hostage negotiations. His presence then has fueled speculation now that Waite was being used as a cover for North's Arms for Hostages deal.
He's been depicted as some kind of a dupe, a stooge. His motives have been called into question. In my experience of dealing with brave men, and I have had much, Terry Waite is among the bravest of the brave.
North tried to telephone Waite at the military base where he's undergoing medical treatment, but couldn't reach him.
What hasn't been heard is Terry Waite's version of the events. His family says he is anxious to respond to the allegations and will do so just as soon as his health permits. Rick Salinger, CNN, Cambridge, England.
The U.S. Coast Guard says no more room at the inn for Haitian refugees. The Coast Guard commander says a camp at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, Cuba, is likely to fill up as soon as it opens this weekend. 5,000 Haitians have been rescued from sea since the September coup against President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. They're being held in boats. The U.S. wants to send most back to Haiti. A judge will rule on that Monday. Astronauts aboard the